first visited here in 63, late 62, and I moved up here in 63. I started at this school in 63. I was a graphic arts major. My intention was to be a lithographer. I had done some etching, and I was very keen to try lithography. I liked the print medium, but I was interested in a little looser handling of materials that the litho wash afforded. But I met a man at the school my first semester, Gordon Cook, who was an etcher, and his aesthetic and the force of his personality and everything just so overwhelmed me that I changed to an etching major, and pretty much he became my primary mentor in the visual arts and really set my aesthetic all the way through. And so I really became an etching major. That's what I graduated with in 1967. So I attended the school straight through from 63 to the fall of 67. I found tattooing again for some sort of humanities class. I did a paper that I remember we could present it either as a live lecture or as a written paper. And I don't know how I came on the idea to do tattooing, but I thought, well, no one knows anything about that, and it's, I was still keen on the idea, and I thought this is a little explored form of, American kind of folk art. And I had all this material on it, and more importantly, I had the addresses still of the tattoo suppliers, so I sent off to Milt Zeiss for some flash sheets, which were, $1 each or something, these mimeograph things. I got the typical themes. I got a sheet of Christ heads and hearts and skulls or something, and made a presentation, and it went over. Everybody went crazy. They loved it in the class, and of course then they said, well, do you have any tattoos? And I said, no, I don't. And I started thinking, yeah, maybe I should kind of look at this again. Maybe there's more here than, meets the eye. Maybe it's worth getting involved in a little bit. And I bumped into a buddy that I had done a little needle and ink tattoo on in 8th grade, and had lost track of him for years. And he turned out we had a mutual friend. He showed up at this art school opening. He was in the Navy, and he had 8 or 10 tattoos on him, little things. Hong Kong, Sailor Jerry thing from Honolulu, pieces here and there. And all of a sudden it was, wow, tattoos. And I just did this paper for my class on tattoos, and let's all get a tattoo, and we roared across the bridge, and 7 or 8 of us, I think, got tattooed that night. I got a little rose put on, and it just, boy, it brought me right back into it. I was back the second night with another friend and got a butterfly on the other shoulder. And then I found this fellow, Phil Sparrow, who we tried to get into his shop the first night we went over. He was closed. He was a person I knew of from getting the Zeiss literature in the mid-50s. Milt Zeiss had published a course on how to do tattooing, and Phil had written a piece for it, and in his little testimonial that Zeiss sent out with a flyer, the guy was obviously articulate, and he'd written a piece, in fact, on how to do body tattooing, large-scale work, and which later Phil described that tattoo course as useful as learning to swim in your living room, and but I knew his name, and I says, oh, this guy Phil Sparrow's famous. He was in Chicago. So I persisted and went around his shop the hours stated that he was open. And the first day I was in there, I was very struck by his personality. He was obviously a very educated guy that had an intellectual life that was well developed beyond the boundaries of the tattoo world, had a lot of experience. As it turns out, he was an accomplished and published author in a lot of different genres, and a member of Gertrude Stein's circle, and he had come to tattooing through pretty much a interest in psychology. He was a friend of Kinsey's, and he had participated in the Kinsey report in Chicago in the 40s.
He was really fascinated with the idea of tattooing, as most of us were, I think, at the beginning. It takes you over body and soul.
Here's this fascinating guy, and his shop was very different than the other shops I'd been in, which were pretty much wallpapered caves, with this surly guy in the back, what do you want, and the TV on and the faint scent of wine or whatever, and what you'd, figure a tattoo shop to be. And Sparrow's place was very open, a lot of space between the flash. It was painted sort of red and black. There was no barrier or dummy rail in the parlance of the tattoo trade separating him from the clients. He had a workstation set up in the corner. He had classical music on. The whole take was so different that I thought, well, gee, you mean you can do this and still kind of be a thinking individual as well, because by that point I was pretty interested, I thought, what's going on with this tattoo thing? And of course, the couple of nights I spent in these other parlors, I enjoyed the power of the stuff as American folk art, but at the same time, I realized these guys couldn't draw their way out of a paper bag, and I started thinking, is this something that, now how do you get into this? And
he was a fresh-faced, cheery, smiling little boy, and he looked like a cherub, really, and I thought, my God, the tattoo world and the jungle, the tattoo jungle, is going to eat him alive if he gets into it. So I tried to caution him against some of the pitfalls of the cutthroat competition and that he'd come up against, and so on.
I finally hit him up about the idea of learning it, and he just said no. He said, this is a deep, dark world. He said, you don't want to get off into this. You're a nice guy. You got a little wife. You got a little baby boy. You got an art career. You're going to be a good teacher, and you just don't want to get into this thing because it's got pitfalls and nasty areas that you have no idea about, and I'm not going to help you get into it. And finally, because I had the address of where to get the machines and the stuff, I pretty much said, look, I'm going to, once I made the considerably difficult decision that I wanted to do it, I said, well, I'll get the gear and start out, because there's people at art school already that said they want tattoos, and I'll just start on these people, and either with or without your help, and if you choose to help me, at least you'll know that, I'm going to be making a few less mistakes. And so he relented, and but he would continually shake his head about it, and he used to kid me and say, oh, you think you're going to be the Jesus Christ of tattooing, and you're going to resurrect this ridiculous art.